My best friend Nancy blamed me for breaking her and Jack up, so she reported me for cheating on the college entrance exam. My results got cancelled, and she got into Cambridge University as she wished, then cut me out of her life. Years later, she came back to give a speech at our old school as a successful graduate. I hid in a corner and watched. When a giant backdrop started falling behind her, I instinctively ran towards her. Even though my whole body was in pain and my consciousness was fading, I let go of her hand. For the last time, if there's a next life, I won't help you again. Then we really got to start over together. She and Jack found intense love. They would skip class to go to concerts and declare their love under the flag during officers' call. Their relationship burned bright and bold, scorching everything in its path. Not me though. I followed my past self's advice, kept my distance from Nancy, and focused on my studies. She laughed at me, saying, "You were dumb to begin with. You won't get into a prestigious school no matter how hard you study. You're just wasting your youth." She carried the memory of our last life's college entrance exam, dreaming of acing her studies and romance. With just 100 days until the college entrance exam, Nancy and Jack were officially together. Photos of them kissing on the rooftop in the rain spread all over the school. Nancy pressed Jack against an old desk and stood on tiptoe to kiss his blushing ear. She moved quickly, as if afraid she'd be stopped again. I chuckled bitterly to myself and buried my head in memorizing vocabulary. Meanwhile, my classmates whispered among themselves. The excitement of youth was washed over by the sound of studying, filling the whole classroom. The students sitting in front of me frequently turned around, casting admiring and envious glances at Nancy beside me. Her textbook was up, with her phone hidden behind it as she chatted with Jack. Her eyes were bright, her cheeks flushed, and sometimes she'd burst into giggles. After this happened a few times, I lost patience and frowned. "If you're gonna play around, take it outside and don't bother the rest of us." Nancy glanced at me and scoffed, "It's not like you haven't learned this stuff before. Pretending like that won't get you anywhere." She paused, as if remembering something, and added pointedly, "Relax, as long as you don't cheat on the exam, you'll definitely get into college this time." I gritted my teeth and clenched my book, feeling a stabbing pain in my heart. After my English exam in our past life, I told Nancy I didn't immediately stop writing when the bell rang. She didn't say anything at the time, but a few days later, I was informed my English score was cancelled. Someone reported I cheated, and only Nancy knew and had access to my student ID number. When I confronted her back then, her smile was even more mocking. "You can rat me out for dating, but I can't report your cheating? Alice, this is what you owe me." In the last semester before the college entrance exam, Nancy was bothered by Jack, complaining to me that it affected her studies. Back then, I didn't realize she was merely showing off to me. I told her mom in hopes of helping her. As a result, her mom approached Jack's family, forcing him to transfer schools and eventually move on to someone else. I didn't expect her to hold a grudge over this, nor did I realize that in her mind, her entire future was less important than her love life. Swallowing the bitterness in my heart, I focused on etching the words on the textbook into my memory. In our past life, cheating was my fault, and trusting the wrong person was too. I accept that. This time, I have to work twice as hard to make up for it. Nancy continued texting, her fingers flying over the phone. Her textbook had notes crammed on one side, while the other was left blank. Since we were reborn, she hadn't attended a single class or taken any notes. She was completely wrapped up in Jack, faking illnesses for sick leave to celebrate his birthday and skipping class to watch him play basketball. She even wrote love letters to him during. Despite being warned twice by teachers, it was useless. Her book grew cleaner, and the people around her more complicated. She no longer sat at her desk all day studying, preferring to lean against the hallway rails to chat with groups of people. Her uniform hung loosely on her, the zipper down, revealing a shirt underneath with a huge logo from some limited edition brand. Jack would bring her snacks and milk tea during breaks, and they'd flirt in the sun. Meanwhile, Nancy's face was relaxed in the sunlight, contrasting sharply with the classroom full of students blanketed under piles of exams. When I passed by to get water, her new friends stopped me. They draped arms over each other's shoulders, joking, "Alice, are you aiming for Cambridge or Harvard?" I ignored them, so Nancy mockingly answered for me, "What good is trying hard if you don't have the smarts? You'll only make it into a mediocre school at best." In our past life, my English grade was cancelled, and I ended up at a mediocre university. Even factoring in the English score, I wasn't anywhere close to prestigious scores. I wasn't as clever as Nancy, who could soak up in 1 hour what took me 2 or 3. Even when we dedicated similar time and energy, I was always struggling to catch up. That's just fate, Alice. Even if you try 100 times harder, it won't compare to me casually flipping through a textbook. Nancy would paint her nails under the desk, laughing that I was wasting my second chance at youth. I ignored her, sticking a note saying hard work and persistence on the top right corner of my desk. Cambridge or Harvard, it didn't matter to me, I simply didn't believe in fate. To carve out more study time, I applied for boarding. My life reverted to the monotonous 3-line diagram from years ago. Meanwhile, Nancy and Jack were passionately in love. They fought small battles every few days and had bigger blowouts every few weeks. After every fight, Nancy would slump over her desk, sobbing, gazing dramatically at the sky at a 45-degree angle, listening to sad songs on repeat. Until Jack showed up with chocolates to make peace. After enduring till the midterms, I applied to switch seats. The teacher sighed, handing over the freshly printed grade sheet. As I scanned it top to bottom, I saw I ranked 10th, while Nancy fell below the top 100. In our past life, Nancy never slipped out of the year's top 10, always ranking above me. Nancy's been struggling lately. You're close, so maybe keep your seat and motivate her a bit. I firmly refused, saying, "Teacher, I'm struggling with my studies too right now. I'm afraid I can't help her." Many things were fuzzy, and I had to buckle down before exams just to make the top 10. Moreover, Nancy clearly didn't want my supervision. She resented me so much that she wished there had been an unfathomable distance between Jack and me. On our first day Reborn, she had warned me, "Don't meddle in my affairs this time. Get as far away as possible." That's why when I ran into Nancy's mom in the hallway later, I chose to keep quiet. "Sorry, Auntie, I really don't know. Maybe you should ask Nancy." Once, I became the toxic bestie Nancy talked about for this. She believed I was jealous and couldn't stand for her to be happy, so she thought I deliberately tore her and Jack apart. I never thought I'd hear the worst of myself from the friend I trusted most. We've known each other since kindergarten. I thought we'd be friends for life. Nancy's mom wasn't giving up without answers and asked me sharply, "Aren't you her best friend? How come you don't know anything?" I felt like I'd been slapped. My cheeks were burning, and my heart felt heavy. I shook my head, and as soon as the elevator doors opened, I yanked my hand away from hers and ran out. Just like Nancy wanted, I kept my mouth shut this time. And not just this time, I was done meddling in her business. I'd respect the boundaries and just watch and see. I wouldn't understand, but I wouldn't care either. Even though I tried to distance myself, Nancy and Jack's drama couldn't stay hidden. The day after our report cards came out, Nancy got called in for a parent meeting. When I went to the office to see a teacher, Nancy's parents were there talking to the teacher. Nancy stood by them, completely bored, admiring her freshly done black nails. I happened to overhear her loudly assuring everyone, "You don't need to worry, my grades won't suffer. Scoring 600 or 700 points on the college entrance exam is no big deal." The teacher looked at her, clearly baffled, trying hard to advise her not to overestimate herself. But Nancy wouldn't budge, not listening at all. We both had already taken the college entrance exam once. By then, we knew the questions inside out. As long as you remembered the previous questions and learned the answers, scoring full marks was even possible. I lowered my head, planning to sneak out quietly, but the teacher called me over. "Look at your friend Alice, she's always in the top 10 of the grade. You should learn from her." A line that clearly hit Nancy's nerve. She glared at me like an angry cat, clearly not pleased. "I'm just not trying yet." If I were, she wouldn't even be fit to shine my shoes. As soon as she said that, a bunch of teachers looked up at her, her parents looked embarrassed, and Nancy's dad quickly told her to stop with the nonsense. Nancy's mom, looking awkward with everyone staring, apologized to me. "Alice, don't take it to heart. Nancy's just in a bad mood because of her grades. You're good friends, right?" I didn't say anything, just took off after saying bye to the teacher and went back to class. Soon after that, Nancy stormed into the classroom and knocked all my stuff off my desk. "Why is it always you? Who do you think you are, trying to compete with me?" She pointed at my face and shouted, eyes still red from crying. Before I knew what hit me, Jack followed her in. He wrapped his arms around her from behind and shot me a cold look too. Then, in front of the whole class, he held her close and said, "Nancy, you're the only one I want in this life. Not even the devil could come between us." Nancy looked up at him from his arms. Holding his shirt tight, she proclaimed firmly and lovingly, "Jack, even if the world turns against us, we won't be torn apart." The whole class and I just gaped at them, caught up in this drama until the bell rang. Jack, looking all warm and gentle, grabbed Nancy's hand and ran out, fingers interlocked. I bent down to pick up my scattered books, overhearing classmates whispering. Nancy's parents demanded she break up with Jack and had even gone to Jack's house to give him an earful. They said if she didn't they'd tell his family and Dad's company. The plot was playing out just like it had before, and everyone was betting if they'd break up or not. Harry, the class rep who'd been silent beside me, finally stood up and handed out the new quizzes. With my books gathered, I started scribbling on the math test, but my mind was elsewhere. I thought staying silent would keep me out of Nancy's crosshairs. But it seemed just getting better grades than her was a crime. In the past, I'd foolishly felt guilty toward her, but now it just seemed ridiculous. "You've made a mistake." Harry's chilly voice cut through my thoughts, his eyes on the problems I just solved. After asking to switch seats, I was assigned next to Harry. This quiet, humble academic star had always ranked first in our grade. When the class genius tells you you're wrong, you listen. Shoving aside my tangled thoughts and emotions, I focused again and reevaluated the problem. The teacher didn't come until later, storming in looking furious. After that, Nancy didn't show up all afternoon. By dinner time, rain was pouring down, so I grabbed my umbrella and headed to the cafeteria. On my way past the sports field, I saw a crowd gathered, and sure enough, it was Nancy and Jack. They were running side by side in the rain, faces soaked. Every now and then, they'd turn and give each other such loving looks. The head of discipline stood at the edge with an umbrella, looking ready to scold. Word had it they'd tried to jump the school wall after storming out of class and got caught. Suddenly, Nancy tripped, falling over her own feet. Jack sprinted over, scooping her up in his arms, and rushed to the nurse's office. The colorful umbrellas parted, giving him a clear path. In that moment, no matter how bright, everything faded into their background. Just a gray blur. Whispers floated on the breeze, saying how cool and romantic it all was, real high school drama. I turned my eyes toward the large college entrance countdown clock towering over the senior building. 80 days left, bright red numbers against a gray sky. The only lively color around. A shiver ran through me as rain splattered in my face. Pulling my jacket close, I let the crowd carry me toward the cafeteria. Nancy stayed out of class all through evening study hours. Word was the rain had given her a high fever. With time running so short, the teacher still took half a class for a meeting. Only a few weeks left. Want a date? Wait till graduation. You want to? Fine. But remember, this is your future. Be responsible for yourselves and each other. The drama with Nancy and Jack had stirred things up. Many students were feeling the itch. But with the college exams coming, the school couldn't really expel them. They just got a demerit and a school-wide rebuke. Come Monday flag raising, Nancy and Jack each held papers, standing on the podium after days away. With his hair dyed a light yellow, Jack lazily grabbed the mic, not to apologize. Sorry to distract you all studies. I promise no more public shows of affection, he said, detached. Coming from a wealthy family, Jack had gone wild after his parents' divorce. It was nothing new to him. I stood right in front, eyes glued to my tiny mistake notebook, indifferent to the show. Then Nancy spoke, her words making me glance up and freeze. She had makeup on. Her lashes were thick and full, with a sleek black eyeliner winged out from the corners of her eyes. Her originally baggy school pants were shortened to reveal her delicate, fair ankles and a pair of matching sneakers. This wasn't her first time speaking below the podium, but it was her first time reading a self-reflection. She cleared her throat, looked over at Jack, and said in front of the entire school, I don't regret being with Jack, and I promise my teachers and classmates that I will get into a top university. It was the second time she'd said such a thing, confidently relying on memories from her past life. But how could she be sure that this life's college entrance exam questions would be the same as before? After the flag-raising ceremony ended hastily, Nancy and Jack were taken to the principal's office again for a chat. I followed the crowd back to the classroom and noticed the newly posted bulletin board while passing the teaching building. The results for the school's top 10 outstanding students had come out. My name and photo were posted in the most prominent spot. In the past life, that spot was Nancy's. She used to complain about how poorly the photo was taken and would rather not have it. Now, as she wished, she starts mocking me. Just an outstanding student, what's so special about that? In a few days, my photo was defaced with paint. Next to it, a large poster appeared. The headline read, A Murderer's Daughter Called Outstanding? I stared at that paper, feeling like I'd fallen into an icy pit, trembling all over. Many people gathered to watch, and some classmates who knew me turned to look at me. I pushed through the crowd and ripped the paper down, finding Nancy on the rooftop, clinging onto Jack for a smoke. Was it you who put this up? I threw the crumpled paper at her face. She shrieked and hid behind Jack. Jack flicked his cigarette away and pulled Nancy behind him, shoving my shoulder. Got a death wish? Daring to mess with my girl? He was strong and rough, and I got pushed to the ground. My hands scraped against the rough cement, hurting like fire burning down to my heart. What happened with my dad is my deepest secret. No one at school knows except Nancy, who once swore not to tell anyone. No matter how bad things got between us, I never imagined she'd use this to hurt me. Aren't you afraid of karma? I got up, staring at Nancy with desolation in my heart. She used to say if anyone found out, she'd be cursed forever. Karma? Which part isn't true? Your dad's a murderer. Nancy hid behind Jack, pretending to be fearless, her gaze becoming steady within seconds. She looked down on me with a cold smile. I just questioned the results of that selection. Is that not allowed? I looked at her, not recognizing this face, not understanding what went wrong. I truly thought of her as a friend, the person I trusted the most, sharing everything with her. Now those secrets whispered in the dead of night were exposed in broad daylight, stabbing me like knives. My throat felt stuffed with cotton, and it took all my strength to voice the question that had been stuck inside. Why? Nancy acted like she'd heard the funniest joke, sizing me up with contempt. Alice, you seriously thought I saw you as a friend? Why don't you look in the mirror? Do you think you're worthy? The surrounding girls burst into laughter, hugging her arm affectionately. One pulled out a phone, sneaked into school, turned on the front camera, and grabbed my hair to force me to look at it. The me on camera looked pale, dark circles under my eyes, a zit swollen on my forehead. Faded, oversized school uniform hung on me, my canvas shoes a bit worn. I tried to fight back, but they held me down, clamoring to put expired lipstick on me. Nancy leaned against Jack, the sunlight gentle, the breeze lifting her glossy curls. She seemed like a goddess, her gaze filled with pity and mockery. Don't bully our top student, she's quite pitiful. Her family's poor. Her mom washes feet and massages men at a parlor to pay for her education, also gets financial aid. Nancy said. Everyone else laughed. A year the aid didn't go through, her mom begged the school and the office, I saw it myself. That's too pitiful. Why keep studying when you're that poor? Just go work in a factory, Jack said, coughing from cigarette smoke, then kissed Nancy's cheek tenderly. He joked, stay away from her, no need to catch that poor vibe, one day you'll marry into wealth. The entourage kept laughing, brandishing lipstick towards my face. The class bell rang, and I had nowhere to hide. One of them slapped me hard. Take the lipstick and we'll let you go. Dizzy, I heard a loud voice shout. What are you doing? Everyone jumped and turned around. Teachers, the guidance counselor, and the principal stood at the rooftop entrance. I gritted my teeth, lifted my swollen face, tears falling from my eyes. Teacher, I want to call the police. Nancy's rosy face turned pale, she was stunned by the sudden turn of events. She forgot that I was no longer the fragile girl she'd once known. I was mature, resilient in spirit. No humiliation could break me down. I'd plot my revenge against anyone who tried to humiliate me. The door closed tight in the principal's office. I clutched my mom's hand, facing Nancy and her parents. Nobody else's parents came except for hers. The police were there, but since none of them were adults and Nancy was still a month away from 18. Plus they didn't cause any real harm, they advised me to settle this democratically. I won't accept an apology. Handle it as per the school rules. The school rules state that severe verbal or physical abuse warrants the student being put on probation or sent home for parental re-education until they repent. Before confronting Nancy on the rooftop, I already informed the teacher and guidance counselor. Nancy could torment me once, she'd do it again. I have college entrance exams, no time for her games. If she doesn't want to study, then let her date to her heart's content. Nancy's mom turned pale, protesting, Alice, isn't that excessive with the entrance exams coming up? Can't you be responsible? Using emotional blackmail, she added, you two were like sisters, weren't you? Nancy was just joking around, you know her. Even my usually gentle mom's face darkened, wanting to say something, but I stopped her. Auntie, your daughter doesn't see me as a sister. I'm not climbing up to her level. I replied with fake cheer, but my stance was firm. If the school doesn't punish them according to the rules, I'll pursue legal action against all of them. I'll file a case. At the mention of filing a case, the ones huddled in the corner lifted their heads in fright. Jack clenched his fists, stepped forward, and pulled Nancy behind him to shield her. This is mainly my fault. It has nothing to do with her. If you've got a problem, come at me. Nancy wasn't scared at all, instead, she pushed Jack aside and confronted me right in front of the cops. Who are you trying to scare? Go ahead and file a report. If you have the guts, send both of us to jail. Even the police couldn't stand it anymore, loudly scolding them and giving them a bit of a legal lecture. The two of them got chewed out for quite a while. Grudgingly, they accepted the school's punishment, wrote a statement of assurance, and were then taken home. I dropped Mom off at the school gate. She couldn't understand it. How did Nancy turn out like that? She used to be so well behaved and sensible. She advised me to focus on my studies and to keep my distance from Nancy. Keep my distance? I don't even want to see her ever again. I even feel a bit embarrassed that I used to know her and hang out with her. Without Nancy and Jack around, the school felt way fresher. Yet, inside, I felt kind of empty. The airy coldness in my chest turned into a raging wind. Nancy and I used to lie on the same bed, dreaming about the future. We promised to get into the same college, graduate together. Then make money and build careers together, and be each other's bridesmaids. Our partners would be friends too, and our kids would be as close as we were. In the end, we'd hold hands, live in a retirement home together, and find charming old guys to dance with. I once vowed to be Nancy's best friend forever. I even saw her as more important than myself. In the end, it was all a lie, just my own wishful thinking. The void inside grew bigger from the chilling wind, but I seemed more at peace on the outside. The teacher told me the school would issue a statement, and my dad's situation wouldn't affect me. The school's top 10 student spot I earned was thoroughly approved, no problem at all. I walked back to my seat, head held high, despite all those judging eyes around me. Harry, who was always buried in his work, finally turned his head to look at me. His gaze paused on my still swollen right cheek for a few seconds. Then he pulled some test papers out of his desk and placed them in front of me. I stared at the papers, cleaner than my face, and the chilling wind inside just stopped. I took a deep breath, resigned myself to focusing on the papers, and didn't have energy to think about anything else. With just 40 days left until college entrance exams, our last city-wide mock exam results rolled in. I scored a 666, better than any score in my past life. On the same day, Nancy returned to school. Last weekend, just as I went back home, Nancy's parents turned up with gifts and supplements they'd bought for me. They begged me to forgive Nancy and let her return to school. She'd been at home for a month, refusing to study and constantly trying to sneak out to meet Jack. Her parents yelled and scolded her, but it was no use. Nancy even threatened them with self-harm, using a knife to scratch her skin and leaving scars on her arms. She threatened to end her life if they forced a breakup or caused trouble for Jack. This time, she got what she wanted and became inseparably locked with Jack. "Alice, I'm begging you, let Nancy return to school. We'll make her bored there and stay away from that boy." Nancy's mom cried, looking more haggard than a month ago. Nancy's family situation isn't all that great. Her parents have run a breakfast shop at the community gate for over 10 years, working hard to support her education, giving her the best of everything. Nancy's mom used to boast to everyone about her daughter's academic prowess and liked to inquire about my grades from my mom. When she learned the details, she'd generously wave it off, telling Nancy to help me improve my scores. Deep down, she looked down on me just like Nancy did, naturally thinking I'd never match up to her daughter. Even now, she held my hand with hope for the future. "When our Alice gets into a good college, we'll treat you and your mom to a fancy meal." I almost couldn't hold back a laugh, grateful she had no memories from our past life, or it would have been awkward. In our past life, after getting into Cambridge and cutting ties with me, Nancy's mom blocked me on message. Even though we lived door to door, she'd ignore me whenever our paths crossed in the hallway. I was focused on studying and couldn't be bothered with them, so I agreed to Nancy's return. The day before going back to school, I gathered everything related to Nancy from my home. At first, I intended to return it, but when I got to her place, I heard a huge argument inside. Nancy had stolen their bank card to help Jack buy a motorcycle. "It's just $10,000, right? Once I'm making $1 million a year, I'll return $50,000, with the difference as interest," she said impatiently through her mom's sobs and her dad's scolding. After college, she ended up in investment banking. Her degree was her ticket in. With her good looks and remarkable skills, she was indeed making millions shortly thereafter. So, she probably couldn't care less about the old stuff I had. I turned away from her building and dumped the bag into a trash bin. The moment Nancy came back to school, she sought me out. "What good is such a high score? Can you remember every single college entrance exam question?" Leaning over the desk, she showed off extravagant tattoos covering nearly half her arm. The most noticeable were hers and Jack's initials. Even without the tattoos, beneath were scars of varying depths. Jack's arms were the same. I'd seen pics she posted on her Instagram. In others' eyes, these were ugly, unsightly scars, but for them, they were glorious badges of their love. When I ignored her, Nancy bent down to look right into my eyes, speaking deliberately low. "We can work together, piece the exam questions together from memory. Harvard, Cambridge, you name it, you could pick." With the college entrance exam approaching, she was finally feeling anxious. Too bad she couldn't recall all the questions from back then, so she came to me. I couldn't even be bothered to glance her way, pulling out an English vocab sheet instead. She was about to say something, but then the teacher walked in, frowning and scolding her. "Nancy, if you're not studying yourself, don't distract others." Nancy rolled her eyes and straightened up unwillingly, throwing sass as she left. "Playing all high and mighty, you'll definitely beg me." Who knows where her confidence came from? I never went after that test paper. She seemed to need it more, struggling over a blank page every day. In 10 days, she recalled half a page of questions haphazardly from different subjects. She approached me twice, and each time I refused to share a word. That night, I found myself locked out of the dorm. Everyone was too intimidated by Nancy to let me in. "Alice, I'm sorry, but we can't mess with Jack, her boyfriend." Ever since Nancy came back to school, she's been forced to live in the dorms. Her mom insisted we be roommates, saying we'd look out for each other. Nancy sure keeps an eye on me, always finding new ways to mess with my stuff. My clothes start disappearing, and my washcloth gets covered in paint. Sometimes my bed's soaking wet, and I have to nap on a desk in class. When I can't sleep, I use a flashlight to study or watch the school at 4 a.m., bathed in moonlight. But doing that too much wears me out and messes with my study schedule. So, I usually eat a quick lunch and head back to the dorm for a nap. Around noon, everyone's resting in the classroom, so I think Nancy might be there too. She's on the top bunk ladder, ready to climb down, and looks surprised to see me. I stop at the door and see she's in just a little slip dress. Her body, still maturing, is barely covered. Her hair's all over, cheeks flushed, and her eyes have that glistening look. Following her guilty glance, I peek up at her bed. Through the slightly open curtain, I spot a guy's arm. Nancy quickly jumps down and blocks my view. "What are you looking at?" she says. I pretend nothing's happened, grab my stuff, and leave. In the classroom, everyone's either napping on their desks or studying hard. My rock-steady desk mate, who hasn't moved since I left, keeps flipping through pages. I quietly sit down, just about to lay my head down when he asks, "Which school are you aiming for?" I blink, coming to my senses, and say, "Cambridge University." Back in the day, I aimed for Cambridge too. This time, I'm going all in again. Harry nods and gets back to his books. My eyelids droop, and I drift off. A few days later, I see Nancy sneaking back to the dorm alone around noon. After lunch, word spreads that the dorm supervisor caught Jack in Nancy's bed. Both barely dressed, with Jack down to just his boxers, lots of folks saw. So, 20 days before college entrance exams, they both got sent home again. This time it's serious, they can only return once exams start. Jack's dad came by, ready to take him home. Nancy chased the Bentley in the rain, crying as she ran. Finally, she crumpled to the ground, soaked by the downpour. Just like a heroine straight out of a teen novel. A few days later, the teacher quietly asked if I knew where Nancy was. After being dragged home, she ran away with a fever and was missing for 2 days. I remembered Nancy's Instagram post from earlier that morning. The love may be miles away, but so can countless mountains and seas be leveled. The picture was of her on the back of Jack's motorcycle, smiling brightly. Behind them was a huge concert poster. It was for a singer we'd both loved since middle school, whose first concert was in Shanghai tomorrow. We promised to save up and go after graduation. I didn't tell the teacher any of this. I only exposed her to the dorm supervisor before because she started it. To stay focused on my studies, I just needed her gone. Now she doesn't bother me, so I respect her decisions. Yet, eventually, the teacher found out she went to New York. Unfortunately, before her parents could get her back, she and Jack got into a car accident. After the concert, they went racing and crashed off a winding mountain road. Luckily, the bushes and trees cushioned the fall, and they had just some fractures and scratches. Nancy had a long scratch on her chin from a branch. It might heal fine, or she might need expensive surgery to fix it. While I was home getting clothes, I heard Nancy stirring up drama. Jack showed up and swore in front of her parents he wouldn't abandon her. I love you for who you are. No matter what happens, you're the most beautiful to me. Nancy finally smiled, returning to school 10 days before exams, wearing a mask. She acted like a victorious general, proudly linking arms with Jack. Her entourage called her Sister Nancy, admiring her for her daring pursuit of love. She grinned, saying, "Youth is for being wild. Unlike some people who just study, how boring," she added. "Yeah, no way would I want a girl like that," someone chimed in, and they all laughed. I walked past, pretending not to hear their veiled insults, but Nancy's crew caught up to me anyway. They dragged me to a rental 200 meters from school. Nancy sat on the couch, and Jack played games in the bedroom. The place was filled with signs of life. They must have been shacking up for a while. When it was just me and Nancy, she slapped a piece of paper and a pen on the table. "Either write down the exam questions now, or we're locking you up until the exams end," she demanded. She didn't even bother pretending anymore, smoking like a true rebel. She was nothing like the kind, radiant girl from my memories. I hesitated, then decided not to humiliate myself and sat on the couch. "All right, I'll give you all the questions." Nancy has always been naturally smart, never kept an error log, just tossed them when done. Unlike me, with over 10 error logs, even compiling past entrance exam questions. The questions she struggled with I'd already practiced countless times. In under 2 hours, I recited all the past entrance exam questions. "I thought you were so pure, but these questions? You've memorized them like the back of your hand." Nancy smirked, flipping through with that predictable disdain. I didn't reply to her smugness, just put down the pen and left. No clue what she told Jack, but he believed those were legit exam questions. In the last few days, they memorized the answers like crazy. Only when Nancy walked into the exam hall, satisfied, did she put away the wrinkled sheets. "Alice, if I get into a good college, maybe we can be friends if we end up classmates." I gave her a smile, took a deep breath, and entered the exam hall. The first subject was physics. As I opened the paper and saw the first question, I paused, then chuckled. 2 days of exams passed by like a surreal dream. I walked into the classroom and Nancy immediately went crazy, grabbing my shoulders. "Why? Why is it different? How could it be?" She looked incredulous, bombarding me with questions over and over. The college entrance exam was nothing like how it was in her past life. She memorized everything for nothing. I watched her fall apart calmly, her pride shattering bit by bit. "You knew, didn't you? Why didn't you warn me?" Seeing she wasn't getting answers, she started spinning conspiracy theories. Just like before, if the results weren't what she wanted, it was somehow my fault. "You were the one who told me to stay out of your business and to get lost." I sneered, pushing her hand away, throwing her own words back at her. "Besides, who am I to you? You're way better than me, why listen to anything I say? I might not believe in destiny, but I do believe in cause and effect. You sow what you reap." Since she got another chance at life, she never took any practice tests seriously, but I did. The mock exams changed, with many questions and formats that I didn't remember from the past. Destiny changes, just like our second chances. The mess we're in is all because of her choices. Nancy stood there, eyes wide, staring at me. Who knows if she was mourning her imagined past glory or realizing that her promises were now a joke. I packed up and left the classroom. White papers fluttered down from the rooftop like snowflakes. Boys dashed past, their laughter as wild as the wind. The countdown to the college entrance exam hit 0, but in that moment, our youth felt alive. I went home, changed out of my uniform, put on a dress, did my makeup, and went out to party with new friends all night. The next day, I caught a train to Cambridge, traveled further north, and spent a month touring Europe. I saw Nancy again at my graduation party. She sat beside her parents, looking plain, like she was trying to seem well-behaved. When my mom dragged me over to toast, Nancy's mom and dad looked awkward and embarrassed. I still remember them saying they'd treat us to a feast if she got amazing scores, but here they were eating at my party. I scored 690 on the college entrance exam. Not the highest, but good enough for Cambridge. But Nancy didn't even qualify for a junior college. She's planning to redo her senior year. Seems like she's too infamous at our old school for any teacher to want her back. Now both she and Jack are trying to find a transfer to another school. Alice was always so diligent and hardworking. We knew she'd get into a good university. Not like our Nancy. Nancy's mom sighed sincerely, stuffing a thick envelope into my hands. School hasn't started yet. Could you tutor Nancy? We'll pay the going rate. I held the envelope, looking at Nancy, half expecting her usual temper tantrum. Instead, her eyes reddened, her voice choked up. Alice. She used to call me that and clutched my hand gently. I know I messed up. For the sake of our past friendship, will you help me? She looked at me hopefully, her face pleading, though a stubborn defiance burned in her eyes. The day the exam results came out, a video of Nancy promising to attend a prestigious university got leaked. Now it was viral on the school forum and everyone's social media, giving her a healthy dose of ridicule daily. Alice, I swear I'll study hard this time. I want to get into Cambridge too, and we can hang out again. Nancy clung to my arm, making promises and painting grand visions. She's always been great at sweet talking, charming those around her into softening their stance time and again. I always fell for it, ready at her beck and call. All right, I'll tutor you. Nancy cheered, jumping up to hug my arm, pulling me to sit next to her. Leaning on my shoulder, she whispered where only I could hear, could you tutor Jack too? If you're tutoring one, you might as well tutor two. I forced a smile. Sure, you both can come. The next day, at the agreed time, I didn't show up at the library. I knew today was Valentine's, and neither Nancy nor Jack would make it. At the party, when I went to the bathroom, I overheard her on the phone with Jack. They planned to go up the mountain, praying for love and academic success at a temple, rumored to be very effective. I gave Nancy one last chance, which she spent on her fling with Jack and some deity. So all I can do is wish them a happy life and academic success. That night, I returned the money her mom gave back, deleting all my contacts with Nancy. Before school started, I took my mom on a trip to London. On the day of freshman orientation, I met Harry at the reception desk. Hey, didn't you go to Harvard? In his past life, he was the top scorer in the province and lost touch with everyone after going to Harvard. I'd only occasionally hear from others how impressive he was, just finished his PhD and stayed on to teach there. Of course, in this life, he still ranked first, but opted for Cambridge instead of Harvard. His eyes gleamed, and he said, with my scores, I can choose whatever I like. I was momentarily stunned, but then it started to make sense. When you're talented and work hard, it doesn't really matter what you choose. But for those who think they're too good and don't put in the effort, they don't even get a choice. The next year, for the college entrance exams, Nancy and Jack still couldn't make it into college. In the end, Jack's dad paid off someone to get him into a private vocational school. Nancy wasn't ready to give up and decided to repeat a year. But during that year she got pregnant, and the whole study plan went out the window. After that, I barely heard anything about them until a school reunion a few years later, where some former classmates who had returned to teach at our hometown school mentioned them. Nancy had a daughter with Jack, but his parents wouldn't even let her through their front door. All this love is worth nothing to people with money. This was years ago. They said Jack had cheated on her, found someone younger and prettier behind Nancy's back. Cheated? I heard his family was nearly bankrupt, owing a huge debt to the bank. Everyone chimed in, piecing together the scattered bits of Nancy and Jack's lives. I stayed silent, waited until everyone was nearly done eating, and quietly slipped out to pay the bill. As I headed back to the private room, someone called my name. I knew that voice. It was Nancy. She came to the reunion but didn't walk in, just stepped out from the corner to stand in front of me. She didn't seem to be doing well. Her hair was brittle, and her clothes were cheap. Even in the summer, she wore long sleeves to completely cover the tattoos on her arms. Long ago, we promised each other that whoever got rich first would take care of the other. Now I'm a successful lawyer and capable of supporting her. But we're no longer in a position to lean on one another. Alice, heard you became a lawyer, Nancy said, lips pressed together as she awkwardly smiled at me. When she smiled, the scar on her chin became even more noticeable. I wanted to consult about a divorce, she added. I cut her off, handing her a business card. This is my assistant's card. Set up a time with her. She froze for a moment, took the card, and thanked me, clearly uncomfortable. I gave a slight nod and didn't invite her inside, just walked past her. Before I entered the room, she called out to me again, paused for a bit, then asked, if back then I'd made the same choices as you, would things be different now? By the time she asked that, she pretty much already knew the answer. But youth is gone, and life doesn't give seconds chances. I didn't answer her and just went into the room. As the door opened, someone inside shouted, turned a good hand of cards into nothing. Serves them right. In the end, Nancy never did approach me about the divorce. She asked my assistant and found out my consultation fee was $30,000 an hour. On another day, I attended a concert. A client knew I'd been a huge fan of a popular singer for years and gave me 2 VIP tickets. That night, I sat where the view was best, with an empty seat next to me. Cameras scanned the room, everyone was hugging tight and screaming wildly. I quietly listened to the pop songs that were huge a decade ago. Deep in my memories, unfinished test papers, countless vocabulary words, endless exams all shimmer like gold. That was my youth. Not dramatic, not hysterical. I was diligent and down to earth, achieving what I wanted step by step.